It's that wonderful time of year where there's a list there's a list there are lists everywhere. And in today's video, I'm going to add one more. I'm going to talk about some of my favorite alternative releases of the year. Emo, pop punk, hardcore, ska, everything under that type of banner. And no reason to ramble or give some big preamble. You know how this video is going to work. I'm going to talk about some of my favorite albums. In no real order, except for the last one. I really think there's a clear-cut standout album in the scene this year. Also going to be talking about some honorable mentions, I guess. The best way to kind of describe that. Some albums that, you know, I didn't listen to all the time this year, but some that really stood out, and I'm really looking forward to checking out those artists next year. And speaking of 2020, we're almost there, folks. I'm going to talk about what I'm looking forward to in 2020. Hey everyone, Future Mike here, just jumping in to say, to ensure that this video isn't like 35 minutes long, I separated honorable mentions and what I'm looking forward to in an entirely separate video that should be online right now. I just think that's easier to digest than one long 35-minute movie. Clearly I had a lot to say this year about what happened in music, so two separate videos, both online right now. I hope all that makes sense because sometimes I'll be referring to something that didn't happen in that video, but it'll be in the separate video, so I hope all that makes sense. Enjoy the video. Back to you, Mike. Okay, I may have been a little bit too hard on this record. The Menzingers' Hello Exile. I said in the review of this record that it was more of a Rented World Part 2, and I think some people took that as a negative. I didn't really mean that. I think this record just sonically, I guess to sound like a music nerd, sounds more like Rented World to me than it does After the Party, and I saw some people disagree in the comments and some people agree in the comments, but the more and more I've come back to this album, songs like Portland and Strain Your Memory really stand out. There's some great songs on here. It's a great punk rock record. And, you know, every time a band, you know, has one record and is super popular and then they change their sound, everybody gets on their blogs and grabs their pitchforks and just, you know, complains and yells about it online. But when a band, you know, doesn't really change their sound and kind of gives fans what they want, with a few tweaks here or there for sure on this record, you know, nobody really is out here praising consistency, and I'll be the one to do it. This Menzingers they've really solidified themselves with After the Party as one of the best punk rock bands of the decade. I've seen them on a bunch of lists like that. I think On the Impossible Past, like I've said before, is one of the best punk rock records, and rock records ever. I really do believe that. They're one of the best bands of the decade, one of the best bands to come out, you know, in the last few years easily, and they're one hell of a consistent band, and I'm not going to be the one that's going to yell and scream about consistency when we scream so much about bands changing their sound and selling out. This is a great punk rock record by a great band. Grumpster, Whelmed. I think the Ramones-core-esque bands really get a bad rap, which is what I would definitely classify Grumpster under, kind of that Ramones-core style. I think when people think of Ramones-core, they kind of, you know, disregard it because it's hokey, I guess. You know, a lot of those bands kind of go for more of a humorous aspect in their music, and it's not raw and real or filled with passion as some of the other music, or that fans perceive other music to be here. But, you know, you have bands like the Copyrights, or the Lippies are back, or Teenage Bottle Rocket is probably one of the more modern, famous bands under the Ramones core banner. You have, who else? The Bomb Pops, who we're going to talk a little bit about later. But on this record, songs like Underwhelmed or Crumbling, Tunnel Vision is one of my favorite songs of the year. I immediately, when I heard that song, and then Crumbling, I think, was out as well, I immediately went to go pick up the record from Asian Man Records. You know, I think, like I said, Ramones Core gets a bad rap because I think everyone just thinks of it as this, you know, funny ha-ha type of music, but there really isn't anything, you know, that kind of reminds me of the more humorous slant in Ramones Core on this record. You know, this record talks about, you know, drugs, anxiety, and depression, so definitely lends itself to more of those serious topics than kind of what I would say more Ramones Core is known about. But if we're only, you know, like I said, if you only have time, when a lot of people check out, I imagine a lot of people kind of do the same thing that I do sometimes when I go check out a new band. It's like, all right, let's go see what the #1 song is on Spotify or Apple Music or what have you. From this record, I definitely check out Tunnel Vision, Crumbling, and Underwhelmed, some of my, you know, favorite, you know, punk rock songs of the year, and especially on this record. I think Grumpster is a very, very underrated band. I haven't seen, you know, a lot of blogs or anybody talking about the band or this record. I think going into next year. And obviously this album just came out, but with the next album cycle, you know, I think they're on tour right now with Anti-Flag, or were touring with Anti-Flag. That's how I found out about the band. I think Chris number 2 of Anti-Flag was tweeting about, or he did some interview where he was talking about, you know, what he's listening to now, and Grumpster came up, and that's how I found them out. So, you know, if you get the Anti-Flag seal of approval and you're touring with, you know, such a big legendary band in punk rock, hopefully more people check out Grumpster here with their record Underwhelmed. Northbound Soul Kiss. This is a extremely underrated pop punk record that has really flown under the radar, and I don't really understand why. There are some great catchy pop punk jams on this thing. Songs like Very Long List, Bad Blood, Cool. I think, you know, I used to say that the Swellers' Got Social was the anti-social anthem, but here on Cool, a song that really just, you know, asks, how did you learn to be so damn cool, I think is just perfect in its, you know, upfront sarcasticness. I really like that about that song and this record in particular. I think it really reminds me, not as far as the sound, but last year when we talked about the best records in 2018, we talked about the pop punk record from We Were Sharks and how that just flew under the radar. And if you liked really fast, in-your-face pop punk, that album was great, and it still flies very under the radar, and I still stand by it. It's one of the best pop punk records of last year, and I think this record is one of the best pop punk records of this year. Definitely draws some influence more from modern emo, from the lyrics, and kind of the more somber songs on this record. It's not as, you know, straight, fast in your face here. I would say, you know, when we were talking about the different types of pop punk, like especially with the We Were Sharks, that's more of like a you know, an I Call Fives, or just a really, you know, when you turn it up to 11 and that record never stops. Here on Northbound, I'd say a good comparison. You know, it's kind of Newfound Glory. You get the fast songs, you get the more somber acoustic songs, and everything just works so well on this record. I really hope it doesn't fall under the radar like we've seen so many other pop punk records do. Bands like, you know, Light Years, Forever Came Calling, I Call Fives, A Loss for Words, some great pop punk bands who released some great records and just never made it to the level of, you know, the Story So Fars or the State Champs or the Neck Deeps of the world. It just didn't work out for a variety of reasons. But here in 2019, Soul Kiss from Northbound, a great record, definitely draws some influence, I'd say, more on the pop punk side. Definitely has that modern stuff where you could be like, okay, this kind of sounds like the Story So Far, but there's also some elements of more chill pop punk, I would say, like Jimmy Eat World, for example. Definitely different varieties. I mean, but like I said, there are just some straight up jams on this record. First track, Very Long List, is probably, you know, it's a song that I sent to my friends and was like, hey, you should check out this band. That's a song that I sent to them. So if you're going to check out one song, if you're really pressed for time, I'll say check out Very Long List. But Soul Kiss from Northbound, a great pop punk record. Future Teen's Breakup Season. While not as poppy or immediately infectious as the band's record Hard Feelings, this record here, Breakup Season, is still one of my favorites of the year. Overall, I think this record is a lot more somber than the band's previous effort, Hard Feelings, but there are still some mega poppy anthemic jams like Born to Stay, for example, and one of my favorite just clear-cut pop punk songs of the year. But you also have a lot of the more somber songs like So What or Something Nice on this record, and I think that's why it didn't immediately catch on with people. I think Hard Feelings is just a lot more poppy and just easier to remember, you know, when you're listening to it, especially for the first time. But here on Breakup Seasons, I've said this before about Future Teens, they just get dating in 2019. I don't think any other band has gotten it from what their lyrics are to what they reference in their lyrics. Future Teens just get it. Very excited to see what the band's going to be doing forward and see how this band can catch on, because they're not your, I wouldn't say they're your typical pop punk or emo outfit, especially the vocalists I think are very unique here, and all these different songs. They're not giving you just the straight, you know, poppy anthemic jams that we're so used to in pop punk. Future Teens Breakup Season, a very, very good album. Insignificant Other, I'm so glad I feel this way about you. A great mix of pop and emo on this record. You have your standout, you know, infectious songs like I'm So Glad I Feel This Way About You, Heathers and Brushes. Heathers is just a great song. That's the one song I would recommend if you only have time for one song to check out from this record. But there's also a great balance of the more somber songs here that really remind me of bands like I Hate Myself or The Saddest Landscape without the screaming. Those bands in the kind of the late 90s, early 2000s, underground emo bands were more known for very slow guitar parts and then just blasting, 30 seconds later with screams and nothing that you can understand. Songs like Bittersweetness or January really remind me of bands from that era without the screaming. Of course, the vocals here are more in line with what the music that you're hearing, more somber, nothing really out in your face screaming. So it was interesting when I first came across this record. I was like, okay, it's going to be, mostly just, pop stuff, a happy-go-lucky kind of record. But you got a lot of different things on this record as well. One of my favorite songs, the later half in the album, is Real Date. I just love the pure honesty, that when the band here is talking about, hopefully one day I can take you on a real date. I love the whole concept of that and just the pure honesty in that from Insignificant Other. Origami Angel, Somewhere City. This record is very interesting to me. It was released in November, so, there hasn't been that much time that has passed, obviously, but a lot of people have been throwing this on their end of the year list. So when I saw it, I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And I was kind of stunned. A lot of people were like, 3 pages of how to describe the sound of this record. Definitely think there's some, skate punk in here where this record is just fast. I mean, that's the easiest way to describe it. There are some songs later on in the record, like Find Your Throne, that kind of slow it down a little bit, but there isn't some, massive anthemic, sad acoustic anthem on this record. It's just fast, which reminds me of early skate punk bands, but also that early, hardcore punk sound of bands like, Minor Threat, which I'm sure is going to piss a lot of people off. That's definitely here. Influences from math rock almost. A lot of that is packed into this, and I saw a lot of blogs try to, look up, $50 words on how to describe the sound here, and I have it clear cut for you very quickly. The sound, the easiest way I think to describe the sound of this record is thrash pop punk. So there you go. Not a genre you hear a lot talked about, but there's one band here, especially from the Chicago area, called So Many Ways that I think really, had that sound early on, had it years ago, and really flew under the radar. Nobody cared about it, and I knew at some point someone was going to come along and just, play their instruments better than the typical pop punk bands, and that's what the consensus is online, that a lot of pop punk and punk rock is just these 3-chord bands playing the same stuff over and over again. And just to be clear on what the sound of thrash pop punk is, I think songs like 666 Flags and Dr. Whomst really showcase that kind of sound. And because I've only met one human being that has ever known what or who So Many Ways are, here's a quick clip of 2 of their songs and the best kind of example I can think of when I say here's the sound of thrash pop punk. Right, like I said, thrash pop punk. So if you want to listen to a record that is just, turned all the way up to 11 and doesn't stop for the entire 10 tracks that you have, check out Origami Angel, Somewhere City. Mannequin Pussy, Patience. A great mixture of hardcore, in-your-face, hardcore punk, and then you have the slow, methodical songs as well. When I first heard Drunk 2, I instantly went to go pre-order this record. That song and Who You Are some of my favorite songs of the year. You also get Patience here, the first track on this record, really just in-your-face hardcore, but a lot of the other songs here have a more melodic tone, especially like Drunk 2 or Who You Are or, In Love Again, Cream. A lot of slower, methodical songs mixed with a lot of great in-your-face hardcore. Mannequin Pussy, Patience, just a in-your-face kick-ass record. Pup, Morbid Stuff. I mean, you kind of had to see that one coming, right? Anyway, Pup on this new album I think really solidified themselves with the current crop of punk rock bands. I think a lot of people would say that they've already been solidified with their previous efforts here, but as far as the current bands that I think are at the top of their game that really can't do any wrong, Joyce Manor, the Menzingers, and probably adding Pup to that category here with this new release. Just pure chaos, hardcore punk, literally the perfect mixture. I can't think of another band that's doing it this well. You know, one of my favorite tracks on this record, Scorpion Hill, with the lyrics. I have some pretty dark thoughts, and I like them a lot. You know, Pup on this record really solidify and you know, perfect that chaotic mixture of chaotic punk, and then slowing it down when punk needs to, with a lot of other bands that don't do that and kind of give you that more, you know, somber. Not as separate songs, they do that, you know, in the same span of 3 minutes. You get that somber, you know, part, and then that really loud, chaotic part that, you know, Pup is really known for. And I think Scorpion Hill is kind of the best example of that record. Pure chaos is probably the best way I can describe Morbid Stuff by Pup, one of my favorite records of the year. Field Medic, Fade into the Dawn. This is probably the most unique record that I'm going to talk about today. Self-described as DIY freak folk. So I guess we're putting them in the folk punk category. Probably my favorite, not even probably, my favorite folk punk record since the Wilds record back in the day. That was, it still holds up to me, and a criminally underrated record from the Wild Together Underground. Here on this record, it doesn't sound like anything that you've heard this year. I think the folk punk genre hasn't really been doing anything that's, you know, unique or anything that stands out. And when you listen to this record, you might not even call it folk. That's what, when I was doing my research, was kind of what the band was describing them as, and what, you know, blogs and other reviewers were kind of describing themselves. And I guess folk kind of works, but it's, God, it's almost a mixture of folk and emo, and there's, you know, I can hear some Jeff Rosenstock on here. I can hear some Wild on here. Very raw, passionate, honest lyrics here. One of my favorite songs on this record, The Bottle's My Lover, She's Just My Friend. Great, probably my favorite song on this record. Henna Tattoo, probably the most catchy song on this record. And that song, for whatever reason, well, I know the reason, you know, reminds me of of James Blunt's You're Beautiful, but obviously in the style of, if a DIY freak folk band produced their version of that song, I think that's what Henna Tattoo would be. You know, sing someone, a significant other, or that you've broken up with, sing them in public and sing them with someone else. I guess I had James Blunt, You're Beautiful on my mind, but that's the comparison that I'm going to make, and I'm sticking to it on this record. A very unique record, if nothing else. If you've never really dove into the more acoustic-y folk side of punk, you know, you're more into the, you know, straight up, you know, pop punk or emo kind of stuff here, definitely check it out. Check out Henna Tattoo first. That's the first song I would say. And if you want to get really sad, The Bottle's My Lover, She's Just My Friend. Great album here, a very unique album, probably the most unique album on the list here from Field Medic, Fade into the Dawn. My favorite record of the year, hands down. When I was putting together this list, it wasn't really a question of what was going to be my number one record. A lot of cool and interesting stuff came out this year, but since the first time I listened to this record, to going back and listening to it so I can, you know, talk about it in this video, you know, every song on this record is great. The lyrics are great. It's catchy. It's stuck in your head. You know, I can gush about this record, you know, for days and days and days. But oh so basking in the glory. I've seen a lot of people putting this record on their list, putting it on their decade list of whether you consider it like a pop punk record or an emo record, what have you here. But I love that it can, you know, bend kind of the genres with pop punk and emo. A lot of the record, it doesn't really like, it's even keel record kind of is the way that I would describe it. There are definitely some fast parts, some slow parts, some an acoustic song and stuff like that, but it doesn't really go, it doesn't delve into that, for example, that Sum 41 or Blink 182 style of pop punk, and it doesn't go into that angry, you know, Rites of Spring emo, for example. You know, it's right in the middle there, and I think it does such a great job there, you know. And on another note, I was, you know, clearly one of the few people that really enjoyed the vocalist here, earlier band State Lines. I think, you know, Cancer by that band is a phenomenal song, probably in a notebook from State Lines. Definitely go check that band out. And, you know, I was so happy that, you know, he came from a band that, you know, didn't do well for a variety of reasons. We always talk about, you know, there's always a number of reasons why a band, you know, didn't make it. Sometimes none of it ever makes any sense here, but when, you know, this record came out, I, you know, immediately went to go pick it up. Some of the songs here, it's rare when, you know, every song on this record you can listen to. A lot, especially now with Spotify and streaming of all that, a lot of people, you know, rarely sit down and listen to an entire album here. But every song here, honestly, I can say that I can sit through and listen to every one of these songs here. The standout for me, I think the morning song, or a morning song from this record, is probably my favorite song here. Impossible Game, I know, is a lot of people's favorites. I think Oh So, you know, with this record, I think it's going to be a while before we see a new record from the band, because this record, I think, is going to go down as, you know, a marker for 2019, kind of the same way we talk about, you know, other albums like Joyce Manor's first record, or Never Hungover Again is what I mean there, excuse me. The Menzingers on The Impossible Past, you know, Pup's Morbid Stuff. Some of these albums that, you know, it's the end of the decade here, so that's what kind of everyone's saying here, but that have come out, and you know, it's rare when the music community can all agree on something. Whether you think this is the best record of the year or the best record of the decade, everyone has, you know, this record is like, yeah, it's one of the best, if not the best here. And like I said, rare when the punks and the emo kids can agree, but it seems like everyone likes this record, and I love this record. Easily my favorite record of the year. Catchy, infectious, heartfelt. The lyrics are great here, and it just leaves you wanting more. I never got to the end of the record, Charlie, here, and was like, oh god, like it's, you know, dragging. Never happened to me. I love this record. My favorite record of the year, Basking in the Glow by Oh So. That's it. That's my list. Those are all my favorite records of the year. Let me know yours in the comments down below. Please like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't. Tell all your friends. Also, let me know down in the comments what you're looking forward to next year in 2020. And as always, thanks for watching.